special place where the sky meets the mountains and the trees, where we can learn to see and live in harmony. Camp Nijona, the place I want to be. Nijona in Navajo means beautiful, for the beauty in all of nature's ways. It's the towering trees, the hawk on the breeze. Nijona brings magic to our days as the sun sparks light from a drop of rain, giving life to all that we have known. We are all one with the cycles and the sun. Camp Nijona, our neighborhood, our home, our home. Camp Nijona, our neighborhood, our home.
When I think of the wilderness, I think of wild animals. Grizzly bears guarding over their terrain. Mountain goats dancing dangerously on the edges of rocky cliffs. And wolves, wild, strong, yet gentle.
I see high mountain lakes formed by glaciers and the snow dripping its blessings upon the planet.
I imagine a place so filled with the flutter of wings flapping in celebration of life that it's hard to see the sky.
When I picture the wilderness, I'll be on the top of the high mountain where I could see forever.
There would be wildflowers everywhere.
And it would smell like, well, mostly it would smell good. Even when I can't be in the wilderness, I can just close my eyes and imagine being there.
You know, a lot of people feel that way, and some never go to the wilderness, but they would fight with everything they have to protect it. It seems just knowing it's there is a great comfort.
Minneapolis is a wild place, a place where you can be close to nature. But there is a legal definition for wilderness. In 1964, the Congress passed down the Wilderness Act, setting aside over 9 million acres for special protection. The law restricts grazing, mining, timber cutting, and anything mechanized, such as vehicles and power tools. What's so great about this law is the way it is written. Wilderness Ranger Mary Beth Hennessy says the words chosen makes the law read like poetry.
We still reiterate those phrases like untrammeled by man, and if you think about that phrase alone, a trammel is a net or a trap, and so to not trammel the land means to not trap it, and that's a very interesting use of a word in legislative piece. And other phrases like the influence of man is substantially unnoticeable. That's a phrase that we constantly live by as managers, and we try to make sure that all our actions are not imprinting nature.
But it's not someplace far away. It's a place in our hearts, and we are all very much connected to it.
The wilderness offers many things. It offers challenge, risk, freedom, responsibility, and pure joy. It teaches self-reliance and responsibility. Lessons of the wild help us understand what it is to be human and what our relationship with nature is all about. As our busy lives get more and more crazy, it's no wonder people are heading off to the wilderness. The Red Rock Secret Mountain Wilderness near Sedona, Arizona, is a popular wilderness area for people all over the world. Visitors travel across continents and oceans to soak in all the soothing solitude at this Red Rock haven.
And I thought about that word, remember, to become a member again, to receive our humanity, to receive our connection with our ancestors, to know that we are of this earth.
Dawson Haywood leads groups on what are called Earth Wisdom Tours. He talks about the connections Native people have with the land and the riches the land has to offer those who will take the time to listen to the silence.
Still others experience the wild by listening in a different way. These kids are not able to hear the sounds of birds in the trees or the wind through the forest, but they are able to experience these things in other ways. They communicate with their hands. Wildlife biologist Ron Popowski is hearing impaired. He often takes groups into the forest where they can learn about nature. Mark wants to know if bears are using the wilderness. Ron says in the wilderness, bears are common because of less disturbance, such as vehicles and machine use. He says it's good to go to a wilderness area if you really want to search for some animals. Ron also talks about the importance of native plants, plants that grow naturally in the wild. He says there are some sensitive species that need to be protected. Wood that is dead and down on the ground is important too. Little animals seek it out for shelter, Ron says, and owls and hawks feed on those little animals. 5-year-old Marvin notices that birds might want to sit on this branch. Mike says he'd like to camp here.
Wilderness has always been special to the lives of people, long before it was given any designation by Congress. In fact, today, American Indians, such as the Hopis, don't have a word for wilderness, because it is not any different from the rest of our natural world.
When I come up to the peaks, I really feel kind of overwhelmed I feel really spiritual because I feel like that I'm really close to the gods of the peaks. And I just feel real somber and I guess humble.
Lee Puyama is of the Hopi tribe's Spider Clan. Lee, like many other Hopis, lives in the city. Her lifestyle is like anybody else's, but her religion is her way of life. And that religion has its roots in the San Francisco Peaks.
In the Hopi language, the San Francisco Peaks are known as Nuwatuke'ovi, which means a mountain with lots of snow. The Hopis believe that the Kachina spirits live on the San Francisco Peaks and all the surrounding area.
Hopis come here to pray and seek guidance from the great Kachinas. Kachina dolls are created to help the children of the tribe learn about their Kachina gods. Some are meant to look scary.
This Kachina is called Jeveo, or another name for him is an ogre Kachina. He is a disciplinarian.
Kachina dolls and dances are part of religious ceremonies held on the mesas. Most of the dances are in the spring and summer. In July, the time comes when the Kachina spirits must return to the San Francisco Peaks to carry back to the gods prayers for rain and prayers for harmony among all people.
When people come up to the peaks, they should also hold it, at least not so much maybe in reverence in a religious perspective, but perhaps just a feeling of respect for what it means to the Hopi people.
Those who lived here long before us were very much a part of the natural environment. Many plants that grow in the wild, in wild places, were a big part of their life for food, medicine, and survival. If you've ever known anyone who seems to understand plants, you might say they have a green thumb. Well, a long time ago, you might call them medicine men or healers. A modern-day medicine woman of sorts lives in a pueblo in New Mexico. She reminds us of the importance of plants in our lives.
These are milkweed, common broadleaf milkweed, lechones in Spanish. The roots are gathered, but also right after, if you break the plant, you get that milky substance. And that milky substance is rubbed on sores. It will help clot bloods very quickly. Sores that scab over and keep scabbing over real hard to heal sores, this is very good for. It's also been said that it will cure warts.
Karen Cook works for the Forest Service and teaches environmental education. Much of what she teaches has to do with the plants that live in the wild. For example, this plant is called yarrow. Although the white flowers are very pretty, it's the leaves that are dried and used in teas.
It's used for fevers or reducing chills. What's so nice about this particular herb is it is mild enough for children. Okay, this is Indian paintbrush, grows everywhere, real common plant. Again, the leaves, actually the whole plant, but mostly the leaves, again, are dried, and it's great for water retention.
The leaves of the mallow plant are dried and used in tea to help soothe the sore throat.
It's also made into a paste. You would boil down the leaves and boil it till you get as thick as syrupy concoction as you can make, and then they would put it with cornstarch and rub it on babies' bottoms.
Chamomile is one of those that tastes good. Karen says chamomile also soothes stomach aches. She has been making tea with it for years, and her children have no complaints.
When people think about living off the land, they think about hunting, bringing down the big buffaloes and the elk and the deer. That's not what sustained folks. It doesn't sustain the third world countries. It's the gathering. It's the the plant life that sustains them. Sure, it was great when they brought down an elk, but like I said, that was short-lived, short-term. It was the plants that kept them alive. It was the plants that kept them healthy. And I think people often forget that. They think about hunting and gathering. They think of the hunting part, and they don't realize 80% of survival was the plant life and what you knew about it.
There are vast numbers of plants that we have not yet learned what benefit they hold for mankind or the world. With wilderness, we have a protected source of gene pools set aside, sort of a living laboratory to explore for medicinal or scientific research. Wilderness serves as a critical habitat for wildlife and plant life threatened by extinction. Ecology is the study of ecosystems. I like to think of an ecosystem as one big puzzle. Even the smallest piece has an effect on the whole. In the Guerreros Wilderness of southern Arizona, wildlife biologists are working to bring an ecosystem back to what it was a century ago. In a flurry of dust and feathers, these turkeys, Gould's wild turkeys, are making tracks where their relatives once tread. For 12 years, wildlife biologists on both sides of the border have been working to move some of these birds from the Sierra Madre Mountains of northern Mexico to the Guerrero Mountains of southern Arizona. It is all part of an effort to bring back the natives and restore ecosystems to what they were a century or so ago.
Watching to see how well species are doing is the work of other researchers in the Southwest. The rare northern goshawk is considered to be an indicator species. That means that researchers measure the health of ecosystems by watching the health of the goshawk population, because goshawks are at the top of the food chain in the ponderosa pine forests. So if there's trouble at the top, there's likely trouble on down the line. This kind of research means a lot of time spent in the woods, long, patient campouts. Many of us like to camp out, but these folks do it with owls, rats, and doves. Hoot Hoot is a great horned owl. His job is to agitate the rare northern goshawk.
Well, the great horned owl is rarely, but a predator on goshawk young. And so the goshawk gets very, very upset when it sees a great horned owl near its nest. So we tether the owl just right underneath the nest, put some mist nets on either side of the owl, and hope that the goshawk will then attack it and get tangled in the net.
Goshawk researcher Dr. Paul Beyer is spending a lot of time in the ponderosa pine forest watching Hoot Hoot bring in the goshawks. But these two are not alone.
We have rats and doves. On the trap, there's these little loops, and the goshawk will come in, and its talons will get stuck in it like you see with my finger. And it'll go up, and it'll pull the trap up. We have the traps tied to the ground, and then right next to the trap, we have a little transmitter. We have a radio in the car, and once one of those gets knocked over, it sends a signal to that, starts beeping, and then we run over and see if the goshawk is here.
Offering the goshawks most anything that either looks good to eat or looks like it might eat them is how researchers hope to lure these large, aggressive gray raptors into the traps. Once a bird is caught, a tiny radio transmitter is attached to it, which enables researchers to track the goshawk and learn more about where it's spending its time and what it's doing. And that's important because just how well the species is surviving is not clear yet.
Examining animal skulls can tell us many things about an animal, things such as their habitat, their physical attribute, and what types of foods that the animals eat. If the eye sockets are very large, that animal could be probably a nocturnal or a night active animal. And what would be the opposite of nocturnal? Diurnal, have you heard that term before? That means that the animals are active during the day. Now let's look at some of the teeth on the different skulls. These flatter teeth are used more to eat vegetative matter, like grasses and forbs and woody vegetation. So this type of animal is going to eat vegetation versus this type of animal whose teeth are very sharp, which would eat what? In comparison to vegetation? Meat, right. And we call those two different types what? If you're a meat eater, you're called what? A carnivore. And if you eat vegetation, you're called
herbivore.
An herbivore, right. And what if you eat both, a meat and vegetation?
Omnivore.
An omnivore, right. Let's try and guess which type of animals we have. Vanessa, what do you think that this animal is right here?
A deer.
A deer, you're right. Lance, what do you think that this second one with the very sharp teeth is?
Could it be a coyote or a...
Getting close.
Close.
It's actually, it has very large eyes so it can see at night. So it's a night active animal and it's very large. And we don't see many of them, unfortunately. It's called a mountain lion. And this one's a mountain lion. Natalie, this one here, which is the omnivore because of the two different types of teeth, what would you say this type of animal is? It yelps at night. Oh,
coyote.
Coyote, right. So those are the three types. We have the deer, the mountain lion, and the coyote.
Many large cities are connected to high mountain wilderness areas through their water supply. The purity of these areas affects the water that eventually reaches your home. If you trace your water supply back, you may find that it has either begun or run through these wilderness areas. Planet Earth is the only planet we know of that has water. It is a resource that has been cycling in this manner for millennia. Imagine the stories a drop of water could tell, but water does not know any boundaries. It flows in and out of protected areas. Pollutants can contaminate the water from the land and from the air. Researchers study water quality by examining water samples from streams.
Acid rain is something researchers are learning more and more about. Acid rain is a term given to water that becomes polluted as it falls through hydrogen sulfide and nitrous oxide vapors in the atmosphere. Those vapors are released into the atmosphere from the burning of fossil fuels, mostly from power plants and cars. Once in the air, these gases combine with water droplets and form sulfuric and nitric acids. These acids can fall as rain or snow, or they can hover near the ground as fog. We're finding this acid rain is affecting lakes, fish, and the health of plants.
Lichens are some of the most sensitive organisms in the living world to air pollution, and so they give us an early indication that there's a problem.
Dr. Larry Sinclair is a researcher from Utah. He studies lichens in wilderness all over the West.
Lichen is two organisms, a fungus and an alga, that live together in a symbiotic relationship. The alga produces food through photosynthesis, and the fungus provides a suitable place for the alga to live. Just on this rock here, there are probably 25 different kinds of lichens, and most people walking by would not even notice hardly any of them. But as you look closer, you can tell that there are different kinds. Down here on the rock, there's an orange one. Up here, you can see there's a yellow one. And there's a white one with black round spots. And that one, those black round spots, are actually the reproductive structures.
Dr. Sinclair is interested in the effects of air quality on these teeny tiny life colonies and what that might mean to the health of all life on our planet.
Lichens, unlike trees and shrubs and larger plants, don't have a root system. They actually have to obtain all of their moisture and all of their nutrients basically from the air. And so when it rains or it snows and that moisture falls on the surface of the lichen, the rain will wash out of the air anything that's in the air, including air pollutants. And so the lichens then accumulate the air pollutants from the moisture that's coming from in the form of rain or snow. And that's why they're such good air quality indicators.
Special cameras are positioned in wilderness areas too. They click shots at different times of the day. From the photographs, researchers can study air quality. They can monitor any changes that may be taking place in the purest places we have over the wilderness. By clapping two chalk-covered erasers together, you can easily see how particles are carried by the air and how they can be dusted over broad areas.
As you know, the weather's been very hot and dry. Make sure you have plenty of water. There is Giardia in all of our tributaries, so it's important to use a water filter so that you'll have your health when you come back out. But our biggest message is, if you pack it in,
pack it out.
And you pack it out.
We know that, don't we, David?
Seems like a long, long time ago there was wilderness everywhere I go. I traveled across this mighty land and I've looked all around. There were Indians and mountain men, stagecoach and railroad trains. They were looking for a place to settle down. They'd spent a lot of time just roaming around. And it's wilderness, that place I want to be. It's wilderness, that place I want to see. 'Cause it seems like a long, long time ago there was wilderness everywhere I go.
Dad, why don't we hang the food back up in the tree anyhow?
Well, we hang it up there so that bears won't be able to get it and get into our food, and then we won't have a problem with them.
Oh.
You know, trying to save our food from a bear and getting into trouble. So we hang it up high. They can't get to it, and they'll leave us alone and leave the food alone.
Where the grizzly bears and the mountain lions and the eagles fly so free. Place where the lizard flies and the mountain breeze and it roams so free.
And you've even got a ski hat, gloves. Are those long underwear?
Well, right now we're just airing them out a little bit, getting ready to go, but up here in a matter of a few minutes you can get a pretty good rainstorm, and it cools down right away. And so we take this with us anytime we go backpacking or day hiking, and that way we can get warmer. So
it's hard to believe on a day like this when it feels like it's about 100 degrees that you might need that kind of equipment, but like you say, you never know, and it's always good to be prepared.
And it seems like a long, long time ago there was wilderness everywhere I go.
Keeping the wild can sometimes be a challenge.
Bells are to let the bears know we're coming so we don't surprise them.
High in the Colorado Rockies, a string of horses and mules is still what it takes when the job calls for packing out whatever's been left deep in the wilderness.
This looks like a wheel and axle from the wagon. Some sheet metal, probably part of the wagon itself, I'm guessing, and a wood stove.
Wilderness Ranger Ann Delvera is describing what remains of an old sheep herder's wagon.
I don't know the exact date of it, but it isn't as old as we would need it to be to have that kind of historical value. If it did have historical value, then we would try to keep it here in Wilderness in its place to provide people the opportunity to experience the interaction between humans and the environment.
This is the Buffalo Peaks Wilderness Area, and so we're not allowed to bring in motorized equipment. We're not allowed to bring in helicopters, that sort of thing, to pack this out. So really, we either have to do it by hand or we have to do it by horses and mules. If you go back probably 50 years ago, or even when the Forest Service was first started, when you thought of ranger, that's what the ranger did. I mean, he had a horse and he patrolled the forest on horseback with pack animals too. You're going to see us doing more of this than maybe 10 years ago. I think it's coming back.
This is Los Angeles, home to more than 14 million people.
We've all heard of problems facing the big cities like air pollution and crime. But now these same problems have moved into the wilderness.
Some of our difficulties are people in the backcountry with spray cans. Basically, any flat surface they find ends up with a tag on it. Out of the LA County, we have, and also San Bernardino County, ourselves and also the San Bernardino National Forest, we have a large problem with youth and gang problems coming up. Large amounts of trash, barbecues, a lot of good parties, having a good time, but what they leave behind is their mark, their tag. We have a real hard problem because what we need to get these materials off the rock surfaces is toxic, and we can't use near stream areas. So we're trying to find solutions that are going to be environmentally sound.
Scott says most of the focus is teaching people how to behave. Just trying to keep a sign in place is tough.
It's pretty common for our signs to stay up no longer than about 3 weeks. If they aren't dug out, then they're either burned, hacked, shot at, run over, chopped up, basically anything you can think of they've done to the signs.
The air quality issue, of course, is really something everybody knows about Los Angeles, and it's smog. And we know pretty well that quite a bit of our vegetation suffers from this contaminated air. The Angeles forest and the situations that we're facing here are not unique. They're just first.
There are decisions to be made about the wilderness. For instance, do helicopter and airplane flights offer access to those who would otherwise be unable to experience a wild place? Or does the noise interfere with the solitude some hike miles to find? Should wildfires burn naturally until they burn themselves out? Or should we step in and stop the flames? How do activities outside the wilderness, especially at the boundaries, affect the quality of the wilderness characteristics? Should fish that are not native to the area be stocked in lakes and streams? Can we deal with the growing number of people impacting wild places, or should we try?
These are concerns we're all dealing with. We are all responsible for the wild places.
By learning about them and experiencing them, we can all make better decisions.
Through our actions, lifestyles, and votes, we can all make an impact on the future of the wilderness.
Come with me to a special place where the sky meets the mountains and the trees, where we can learn to see and live in harmony. Camp Nijona, the place I want to be. Nijona in Navajo means beautiful, for the beauty in all of nature's ways. It's the towering trees, the hawk on the breeze. Nijona brings magic to our days as the sun sparks light from a drop of rain, giving life to all that we have known. We are all one with the cycles and the sun. Camp Nijona, our neighborhood, our home, our home. Camp Nijona.